First of all, I want to say I really appreciate you all coming here and really taking part in this conversation like you have been. You all agree on a lot of things.
Isn't that amazing?
And yet, there are, the Puget Sound is not a robust, healthy ecosystem. It seems like that's one of the things that people can agree on. There might be disagreements over the level, the condition that it's at. And so given that, I'd like each of you to speak about what you think is the single biggest barrier
To what?
to restoring, reviving, improving the health of the Puget Sound while accommodating the millions of people that we expect to move here this century.
Want me to start? Well, I think we've talked a lot about many of them. I think the biggest one, in my view, now having been in this job for 8 months, is the failure up until this point, in my view, to stand back and say, what does this all add up to, okay? And I could make the exact same argument, I think you said this yesterday on the radio, at the federal level with the federal laws, you could stand back. I mean, we've only been doing environmental law type management of these systems for 35 years. That's, it began in the late 60s. Bill Ruckelshaus is on our board, was the first chair of EPA and started a lot of these programs. He was telling me a story the other day about how they tried to start the Clean Water Act, which basically said, make sure all the lakes and everything is clean and perfect in 5 years. Okay, so, that was the first congressional mandate. So, but we've got to be willing to be straight about what's working and what's not working. I just, maybe it's partially a generational thing, but I don't care what we thought was going to work in 1974, okay? We've got to be willing to stand back and say, as I think we would all acknowledge, per your question, that it isn't working, okay, for a lot of reasons. And it's not to point fingers at people. It's just to say we don't need incremental change. We can't get there with that. And I think, frankly, that the creativity that we have by standing back, looking at this whole system, this whole living system, this whole ecosystem, and thinking about how humans are going to come here, how they're going to operate, how they're going to go to school, looking at the whole macro perspective and then coming up with a strategy that people like and will do and will buy off on, and then having a plan that goes forward and having robust implementation of it. So, I mean, like right now, we're talking about enforcement, which has a lot of connotations and people hate it, but we've got a person here who's a developer saying we need more enforcement because it's consistent across the landscape. If we have consistency and it's all level playing field, the market will adjust to those kinds of pressures. But if we just take everything in these little silos as we're used to doing with the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, GMA, SMA, endangered species that are listed one at a time, and don't think about the whole system, we're not going to get there. And then I think the most important thing is we've got to be courageous and have the courage to stand up and when something is not working, fix it, get rid of it, start over, try new things. I mean, when you read FDR's, although there's an FDR book every year, but the New Deal was all about basically adaptive management. Let's try this. Let's measure, is it working? If it's not working, we're going to do something else, and not being afraid to fall down every once in a while. So I guess I'll wrap this quickly, but a little plea for patience, because that's what we're trying to put together with this broader action agenda. We got a huge amount of buy-in. We've met with thousands of people. I think we're running what I think we'll look back on as a really exceptional public process where we're really stimulating great ideas. We're going to try to bring them all together and then chart a pathway forward. But we've got to be afraid to stand up when things aren't working and say that doesn't work and we need to do something else. Period.
So I guess my answer would be, yes, we're in a lot of agreement, and you go around our whole area, our whole region, people really love Puget Sound, and everybody is for a healthy Puget Sound. There is nobody standing up and saying, I want to kill Puget Sound. But it's when it comes to the specifics where people also don't like to say no. They don't like to spend taxpayer dollars. There's a lot of political pressure around specific decisions. And there's also a desire to kind of get along, go along, and sugar coating that's put on things. And so picking up on something David said about courage and honesty. The thing is about Puget Sound that we can't say we're for Puget Sound and then turn around and build a huge new gravel dock at Maury Island. We can't say we're for Puget Sound and then, pave over the landscape. Those two things are, we do those things, and we also say we're for Puget Sound. We got to bring this together and be honest and actually have the guts to say no and to say what's really necessary and to follow through and stop the pretense that we're actually serious about saving Puget Sound, if in fact we're not.